Well, Kansas lost Elmarko Jackson for the year with a foot injury, but Bill Self quickly landed an SEC guard out of the transfer portal to replace him.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Folks, I am Andy Patton, your host today. Thrilled to be joined by Tobias Bass of The Athletic. We got a lot of different stuff we're going to cover today. Today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Game Time, folks. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code Locked On College, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Tobias joins us fresh off the Pangos camp, talking about a lot of high school prospects. We're going to talk about some of those guys, some guys who stood out during the camp process. We're also going to talk about some other high school recruits, Carmelo Anthony's son. We're going to talk about that. Big time addition for Central Florida coming in this upcoming season. All of that coming up later in the show. But Tobias, I want to start with the news out of Lawrence, Kansas that we got earlier in the day on Wednesday. Elmarko Jackson, who was a McDonald's All-American, high-level freshman last year, didn't play at the level that a lot of people expected him to, but was kind of expected to be a bigger contributor for this Jayhawks team in year two. He suffers a torn patellar tendon. Just happened. Incredibly unfortunate injury for him. He is going to have surgery. He's going to be out on a 12-month recovery timeline, so he will miss this upcoming season for Bill Self and the Jayhawks. Elmarko's a player that I'm just kind of interested in, just from the perspective of a guy who didn't really do what a lot of people thought he would do last year. I think Kansas was kind of in a spot where they didn't have as much depth at that spot as they hoped they would. Nick Timberlake, the transfer from Towson, didn't really step up. Obviously, Arterio Morris didn't play for the team. That was a big loss for them. And then Jackson just kind of was, a lot of times he was just kind of there on the floor. He didn't make a big impact, but I'm sad to see him not get an opportunity to take that step this year. What was your read on Jackson's kind of performance last year and kind of just what this means for him not being able to play this upcoming season?
He definitely struggled. I think it's really just when it's hard making that jump, obviously from high school, playing at the highest level, possible, to Kansas, despite them making the turn, they just weren't as good. They just weren't as good, and him being good would have really took their team to a new level. They just lacked depth, especially a school that typically has depth in the past. But I really think his struggle just contributed to not just being able to shoot. It's hard being that size and not being able to shoot at that level. So when they come off ball screens, they're going underneath everyone. They're guarding him basically at the free throw line pretty much every time. It makes it harder to get the ball to Hunter Dickinson, et cetera. So it's a tough loss for him. I feel bad for the kid. I hope that he can, recover and, turn this negative into a positive. I know he's a hard worker. I know that he'll be able to come back stronger and better than ever a year from now. But they had to, it's unfortunate circumstance, they had to finally get someone else. So they bring in Shakeel Moore. He averaged about 8 a game last year. He's a career 31% three-point shooter. But he plays hard, though. He's good defensively, and he brings you some stability. I know Bill Self was adamant about we won't have a bad season again. So he wants older players. He typically does well with older guys. This is another older player. He's a fifth-year guy. I think he'll be able to help him.
Yeah, I think the announcement was like 2 hours after the announcement about Elmarko. Obviously, I don't think that I think that timing just happened to look fortuitous. I would be shocked if that was the first time they had contacted Shakeel Moore. I think they were planning to try to bring him in regardless of what happened with Elmarko, because they had already lost Johnny Furphy, and certainly they brought in some really fantastic depth on the wing for this team. AJ Storr is one of the best players in the entire transfer portal. To land him to play at that 3 spot, kind of replace Kevin McCullough, is a fantastic, unbelievable addition. And I think Zeke Mayo's maybe a bit of an unheralded addition for them, coming over from South Dakota State, and Rylan Griffin from Alabama. They had Riley Kugel for a bit. He ended up dipping and going to Mississippi State, in fact, where Shakeel Moore comes from here. But they did a good job of replacing that depth, and you could tell that Bill Self was like, I do not want to be in a position like I was last year, where you get a couple guys hurt and then you're getting boat raced by Cincinnati in the Big 12 tournament, and you can't really turn it around in time to have a lot of success in the big dance. They got just wiped off the floor in the second half against a Gonzaga team that also didn't have a lot of depth last year. So you can see the plan for Bill Self was to really build a team that had more depth that wasn't going to have that issue. Obviously, to now lose Elmarko puts them in a tougher position. But I'm with you. I think Shakeel Moore, veteran guy, better three-point shooter, really hard-nosed defensive player. I think he fits a lot of what we've seen Kansas and Bill Self like to do. And combined with the other additions that this team brought in, it's hard for me to imagine that Kansas is going to be anywhere near as bad as they were last year. They look like they're going to be back up.
I agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the other teams in the Big 12, you got Houston, you got Iowa State, Baylor, etc. There's a lot of competition at the top, but I mean, for me personally, I'm curious your thoughts. I'd put this Kansas roster right up there with anybody in that conference, even with the loss of Jackson.
Yeah, I think I definitely would. And they bring in two freshmen, Flory, who was renowned All-American. They also bring in Keith Passmore, top 50 kids. So they definitely will have depth and, solid. A lot of these guys, they played in the tournament too, wherever they came from. So I think that they'll be significantly better. And, we'll get back to seeing Kansas basketball next year.
With the freshmen, real quick, before we move on, talk about the Pangos camp. What do you kind of envision their role looking like in year one? I know it's hard. It's early June. The rosters aren't even fully finalized yet. But do these two guys strike you as players who could really impact Kansas right away? Obviously, Flory's got, if he's going to play the 4 or the 5, he's got two very good players in front of him in Dickinson and KJ Adams. But do you kind of see these guys being players who could potentially impact the Jayhawks right away?
I definitely see Florin getting time because they're going to need a backup big, So there were times last year with Hunter Dixon, he was getting foul trouble, and they were kind of screwed. They didn't really have depth at that 5 spot. So sometimes they were kind of leaving them out there and just, don't foul. They get in the lane, just move out the way type of thing. So, it'll be an adjustment for him, but he's highly talented. He's a top 15 recruit, McDonald's All-American. So they're probably going to expect and need him to come in there and play. For Keith Passmore, big-time mega athlete, typically Bill in the past, he always has that one freshman typically that breaks out or that has that, phenomenal freshman season. I'm not sure which one of these guys it'll be, but I definitely think Keith Passmore is definitely in that conversation. He's talented enough. And I think that coming off in a reserve role, I think that he helps because you have, they have a couple of experience out come off that bench. With Jamar McDowell, he's from my area, actually, a talented player. Those two will probably be competing for some of those backup minutes.
Well, we're going to move on and talk about the Pangos All-American Camp, which under-the-radar high school prospects are starting to turn some heads. Tobias was on the ground checking those guys out. We're going to hear what his thoughts are. All that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you all about today's sponsor, Game Time. Folks, it is minor league baseball season, and with multiple programs just a short drive away from my house. I'm like 5 minutes away from the Hillsboro Hops out here. I have the luxury of being able to make last-minute decisions to head to the ballpark. And fortunately for me, Game Time is the perfect place to get those last-minute tickets because prices on the Game Time app, folks, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I also often worry about my tickets being bogus. I don't want to get turned away at the gate because I bought a fake ticket from a third-party app. Fortunately, Game Time's ticketing coverage is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry, and I personally love having that peace of mind. So, folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Folks, you can get 2 tickets to a minor league baseball game for like $25. That's only $5 if you use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, Tobias Bass here of The Athletic joining today talking about the Pangos All-American Camp. Just got back earlier today, jumping on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on. And I was tracking all the data from you and from a handful of other reporters who were on the ground checking out this camp and kind of talking about some of the players who really stood out. And I think that's one of my favorite parts of this camp in particular is like, yes, you can see the Meleek Thomases, and we'll talk about him later, and some of the other like top tier, top 10 prospects in the 25 and 26 recruiting classes. But there's also a lot of players there who are low 4 stars or 3 stars or unranked at a lot of places who kind of use this as an opportunity to really kind of showcase some of their skills, their athleticism, get themselves on the radar for some Division I programs. Who are some guys, you can kind of take it whatever direction here that you want, that kind of stood out to you as you come back from this trip and you're thinking, who were players who really did themselves a significant favor with how they played at this camp the last couple of days?
Well, one first would be Jacob West. He plays for Team Final. He's from Philly. little guard. He's probably like 6'2". Man, is he good? He started off. He's like a 3-star recruit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he started off the game just smoking. I mean, first because that was the first time I had seen him play in person in maybe about a year or so. But he was really good. I mean, he was one of the best. We was probably, after it all said and done, he probably was like a top 6, 7 player there just based on how he played. He averaged 16.8 points, 4.3 rebounds, four assists on 54 shooting from the field. So he was able to score in a variety of ways. I can't imagine his recruitment doesn't go up if he continues that over into the Nike circuit as well. But he kind of reminds me of like a guard. He'll probably go mid-major plus. He's going to like break someone's bracket. So Jake West, so a year from now, 2 years from now, someone's going to be playing Jake West and their bracket's going to be shocked because of this kid. He just kind of reminds me of one of those mid-major guards. He just kind of a know where he may go for 30. I don't know, one of those games, but he's a heck of a talent. Another one that I like, he's ranked. His name is Joshua Lewis. He actually committed to USF maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's ranked like 80. I thought at the camp he probably had one of the highest ceilings at the camp, I think, as far as being a pro. I think that he should be ranked probably 30, 40 spots higher, in my opinion. And NBA scouts raved about his upside. So he's definitely one that I think he definitely opened up some eyes for himself. Just a few others. Amari Allen, 4-star kid, plays for IMG. Really shot the ball very well. Dorian Hayes, which is Chuck Hayes' son, he shot like 70% from three, 64% from the field, 16.5 points. I mean, he was unbelievable. He's a Houston kid. He actually lives about 20 minutes from me. So those were a couple of my standards. There were several others. It would take all day for me to talk about them all, but it was a good camp, and I really liked it because there weren't as many 5-star guys, so you really have to evaluate, and that's what I really took from the camp.
Joshua Lewis was a name that I had down here that I want to talk about, so I'm glad you brought him up. Obviously, committed to South Florida. I'm a really big fan of what the South Florida program is building with Abdur Rahim as the coach. They were fantastic last year, first place in the AAC all year without that being the expectation. I think he's a very good coach, a very good recruiter. I'm not surprised that they land a commitment from a kid who it seems like is going to start rocketing up those boards if he had this kind of performance here. Hopefully they can keep this commitment and end up with Lewis coming onto campus, because I think there's a lot of optimism that he could be one of the best freshmen in the AAC when he gets to campus, and somebody who could really potentially be an NBA player within a couple of years. And I think, again, to your point, that's what makes this camp kind of fun, is you see guys like that who maybe don't get the opportunity to compete against this level of talent, and they can really showcase why, what makes them so great. And I love seeing coaches who are able to identify that kind of talent early and secure a commitment like Abdur Rahim did here with the Bulls. I want to talk Jake West again. You mentioned him too. I see the college list here of schools that have made him an offer, and it's hilarious because you're exactly right. It's literally a bunch of programs that feel like they're going to be like 14 seeds in the NCAA tournament, Fairfield or Drexel or Lafayette, somebody like that. And he feels like the kind of kid who's going to just knock him down. And in an era where you have this transfer portal, the kid's ability to go play a freshman year at a Drexel or a Fairfield or somewhere like that, and get the opportunity to prove that, hey, my high school numbers were not, fluky, or my size is not limiting me, because I look at his bio says 6'1", 165. I'm guessing that's why a lot of D1 programs like high majors aren't knocking down the door for him right now. But if he goes out and scores 16 a game at a Fairfield and knocks off, we'll say, Kentucky or Arkansas now, because Coach Calipari likes to lose those games, go knock somebody off like that, you find yourself at a high major in a year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could see. I mean, that's the exact conversation we were having when I was out there. I was like, he's going to go to Loyola Chicago, something like that, tear up some high major. He's going to transfer up and go to whatever school and just, be a great college player. But he was, and I like it because he's known kind of as more of a scorer, but they just couldn't stay in front of him. He averaged 4 assists a game. He was getting in the lane pretty much whenever he wanted. He competes defensively. I know he's a little shorter, but he's tough. I think one big thing about defense is being tough. It's effort, and I think that he gives that. So if I were a school, I would really take a strong look at that kid. He's pretty good, and he's played very well on the EYBL circuit as well.
Yeah. Wanted to talk about another name that is probably not under the radar one as much. He's 12th ranked player in his recruiting class right now. That's Brayden Burries, a guy that I think a lot of people who've written about the Pangos camp, who've talked about their risers, their stars, their MVPs, whatever, his name has come up quite a bit. One of the best uncommitted players at this point in that 2025 class. What did you see from him? He's 6'4" guard. He's from San Bernardino, California. What did you see from him, and kind of what is your expectation for what kind of impact he could make at the college level?
So yeah, he also played where there as well. I think he made the top 30 games. So I've seen him play a few times, but I've seen him play at two of the biggest camps since October, and he played very well. I saw him in October in Vegas, ironically, at the Wooten. He won the one-on-one championship. He was the best one-on-one player there. He won the actual competition, and then here at Pangos, he made the top 30 game, obviously. So I think he's a really, really good player. He really, really can score. He's gotten better every time that I've seen him. He continues to add to his game. I know several schools recruit him, like Duke, Gonzaga, etc. But I like his game. I like him because he really can play both guard spots. You know, that's really a luxury to have when you have a player that can do that. So playing him at the one or the two, I think he can get things done, and he really can shoot the basketball. So, and I like him because you can pair him with another really good guard. Whether that guard can score or facilitate, I think it works either way. So he's a good guy to have on your roster if you're recruiting.
One more name here before we move on and talk. It's a 2026 player who was at the camp, Kaden House, another guy that you talked about on social media, 29th ranked player in that 2026 class, obviously uncommitted. Most of the 2026 guys are. What did you see from him? Does he seem like a guy who might continue to move his way up that board, especially as somebody who's as young as he is?
I'm a big Kaden House fan. I saw him last year at the EYBL in Augusta. He just gets things done, man. I just like players that are just productive, no matter what it is. And he's a very, very productive guard. You'll look up, he has 15 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. It's consistent. And at the camp, he averaged 15 points, 3.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He also made the top 60 game as well. But he's just a winning type of guard. I think that you can win with players like him. He kind of gives me that little Tyus Jones, Trey Jones type of vibe. Kind of reminds me of that. But he's going to be a really good college player at the next level. He's definitely one of that schools. I would highly recommend recruiting that guy. And his brother, Meleek House, is really good too. I think he's underrated also. So you can get them both. I think that those two are really good players, and I'm a big fan of those two.
Wanted to talk about just about the Pangos camp a little bit in general. You've obviously been there. You've been to UIBL, seen a lot of the different summer circuits. And I know I see a lot when I'm kind of doing research on this stuff that people who watch the Pangos camp really like it. It's a little bit more laid back, a little bit better opportunity to talk to some of the prospects. What was your impression just of the event this year out in Las Vegas at Bishop Gorman? Like, how does it compare when you look at some of the other events in this kind of summer circuit in terms of evaluating talent and just getting access to some of the players?
I like it because especially day 2 and 3, they really were playing hard. That's the biggest thing. It's a long summer. They play a lot of basketball. I think the average kid, they say they play about like 100 games or so, something like that. And that's not including like you get to take a calendar year, it's about 100 games. That's not including practice, camps, etc. So I just because when they're playing hard, you really get to see who's a guy. And come to a camp, that's kind of when you see who's an alpha, because it's easy to come in there and kind of play lackadaisical and just go through the motion, but you see the guys that want to compete. I keep talking about my guy Jake West, but there was a time in the top 30 game, I think they were down like 3 or 4, and the coach was trying to make a sub. He was like, "No, I'm not coming out the game. Like leave me in." And that was cool to see at a camp, because typically kids, I want to go home. Whatever. But he really, really wants to compete, and I like seeing that from those guys. So it was an overall good camp. Vino's is one of the best, and he did a phenomenal job this year.
Want to transition now to talk about some of the top tier guys, or at least a top tier guy, in Meleek Thomas. We mentioned him a little bit earlier in the show. Top 10 prospect by, I'm pretty sure, every recruiting service in that 2025 class. He's 9th at 24/7. He's 6th in their composite rankings. 6'4" guard from Midland, Pennsylvania. Very, very talented kid. He has over 20 Division I offers. We know he's visited Auburn. He visited Pitt. He visited Kentucky, but that was under Coach Calipari. And now he has 2 visits set up later this month, one to Storrs, Connecticut, to visit Danny Hurley and UConn, and then he's also going to visit Arkansas, reconnect with Coach Calipari there. What do you think about Meleek Thomas as one of the top players in this class? And do you have any indication based on the number of programs that are reaching out, connecting with him, all of that stuff, like where he might end up playing college basketball?
So one, I should have got video of it, but he was probably the most vocal leader kid at the camp. Like, I mean, consistently, like every single time, guys are falling on the ground, he's picking them up. Some kid would miss a shot, he's cheering them back. And I love to see that, because sometimes, you don't get to see that from those 5-star kids. Sometimes they're kind of, it's all about me, but he's not like that at all. We know he can play, right? He's a 5-star kid for a reason, but it was the other things that I really, really appreciate, just seeing him be a leader. Yeah. And I would, if any program's recruiting that kid, that's one I think you got to have. I think you got to have guys like that. If your best player or one of your best players acts that way, that's a reflection of your program, and that's how teams are going to be successful. But he was great. He was great at the camp. He's great everywhere. He was one of the MVPs of the top 30 game, and deservedly so. So, I like him a lot. I think that he's a phenomenal scorer. What I really liked was when they were doing drills, Kenny Smith was there, and he was working on with the kids like how to operate in the pick and roll. He was the first kid to volunteer his name and do it. He was the very first one, and Kenny kind of took a liking to him because he was so eager and he really wanted to learn. He kind of messed up a drill or two. He was like, "No, Kenny, I want to run it back. Let's do it again," because he really wanted to get it down. So, he's a phenomenal talent. But to answer your question, as far as who's on him, he's already completed visits with Pittsburgh, Auburn. You said Kentucky earlier. I think Pittsburgh's going to make I know he's kind of from there, so I know they're going to make a real run at him. But UConn's on his list, and I can see him visiting Miami, Tennessee, and Kansas for also as well.
A lot of high profile programs on that list.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
well deserved.
Not surprising hearing that description of him and the mentality. That's always a big separator when you're talking about talented kids. And one other factor, a different factor that often helps is bloodlines. And that's kind of transitions to the next kid I want to talk about here, Kiyan Anthony, the son of Carmelo Anthony, 38th ranked player in the 2025 class, 6'5" guard. He's got a focus on a couple of programs. Syracuse not on the list, despite that being, of course, where his dad played college basketball, won a championship for the Orange back in 2003. What do you think of Kiyan Anthony right now? It seems like he's kind of eyeballing Auburn. We talked about them a little bit earlier. Ohio State is in the mix, and then also Indiana in the mix here. Three obviously very successful programs, different programs stylistically in a lot of ways. But where do you kind of see Anthony as certainly probably not going to be at the level of his dad. He's not quite as big. His dad's NBA Hall of Famer, one of the best of all time. But what do you like about Anthony's game and where he might end up here?
One first thing, super confident. He's one of the more confident kids in the country. I don't know if you saw that video where he said that he would cook his dad if they played one-on-one at the same age. So I don't know if he would do that, but the confidence I do love. I do love the confidence from Kiyan Anthony. He can really score the ball. The efficiency, he's working on it. He's getting better. His dad sometimes wasn't the most efficient, but he could definitely score that ball, and he's learned from one of the best. But he's a big time talent. He scores a little bit differently than his dad, but the ball goes in the hole either way. So I do like what he brings to the table, and I think that whatever program gets, you're getting a super confident scorer that has NBA Hall of Fame, legacy behind it. He has the genes, and typically the genes translate. So I think that he's going to be a good scorer whatever he's doing. But I know that he does like Indiana, Auburn. Those are definitely some schools to look at. I believe Carmelo and Coach Wilson have a good relationship. Yeah, Indiana has put a couple guys in the NBA the last couple of years, especially at that spot like guy with the Lakers. So I think I could see Indiana being an interesting spot, kind of get him towards the end.
I love that the main way to describe his game is that he's a high-level scorer and he's not the most efficient, which is kind of what his dad was for a long time. So very excited to see what he brings. Last guy that I want to talk about, Tobias. This was news that came through on Wednesday. So just kind of breaking it down here as we hear it. Moustapha Thiam, I think that's how you say his name. He's from Daytona Beach, top center in the 2025 class. He is going to reclassify. He is committed to Central Florida, a team that did better last year than I think a lot of people expected them to do. There was not a lot of expectations for them as they headed into the Big 12, but they picked up some nice wins, had some productive performances, some big games. Now they get 7'2" big man here from Senegal. A lot of excitement about his potential as a draft prospect, as a college basketball player. Obviously, anybody 7'2", you got to have some excitement about what they can bring. He's coming to a UCF team that looks very different from last year. They got some other high-profile players. They're bringing in Mikey Williams. Very interested to see what that looks like. Jordan Ivy Curry has been a fantastic college player at multiple different stops. They get Jalen Sellers back. There's a lot of excitement around this Central Florida team, and now they get the best big man in his class now joining the team a year early. What do you make of this?
So yeah, he's 7'2". He played on the Adidas circuit for Austin Rivers Elite. He averaged 15 points, 7.2 rebounds, and 3.7 blocks in about 28 minutes per game. He's the highest recruit in UCF history. He's even ranked higher than Taylor Hendricks, who's in the NBA with the Jazz. So I think that they have a chance to be really good. I think they brought back two of their top scorers, and Darius Johnson and Jalen Sellers, like you said. They bring in 5 or 6 portal guys. So they have a chance to be really good. And I think that he makes a direct impact. I think he comes right in there and he fills a role, and he'll be productive. It'll be a hard learning curve. The Big 12 is the best league in America, and typically freshman kids, when they skip up a level, they tend to have a hard time. But I think that with growth, I know Coach Dawkins will get him right. He has a good cast of veteran players around that'll definitely help him get him to where he needs to be. But I like him. He's a big time talent. I think that he'll fill a void next year for sure.
Tobias, thank you so much for coming on the show, man, for giving your expertise, coming back from the Pangos camp, talking about Elmarko. We really appreciate having your insight on the show. Why don't you let people know where they can find you, where they can find your work, if they're interested in seeing more of your takes and insights?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Tobias_Bass is right there, TOBIAS_Bass, like the fish. You can also follow my work at The Athletic. It's NBA playoff time. We're going to be doing a bunch of things like that. The NBA draft is 3 weeks away, roughly, something like that. So I'll have a bunch of content up there, player interviews, scouting analysis, things like that. So we're going to have – it's a big month for us at The Athletic. So go over there and subscribe.
Thanks again, man. For those of you out there listening, appreciate you all. Thank you so much for making this show your first listen, your first watch of the day. I'll be back with my co-host, Isaac Shade, for Friday. We'll talk about a handful of different updates in college basketball. We'll talk about Wooga Poplar heading to Villanova, what that means for the Cats. That and more coming your way to close out the week on Friday. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, peace out.